Hi, my name is Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing well. So I wanted to kick off my November wrap up today. We are about a week and a half into November and I've already done a lot of reading. So these are all the books so far that I have picked up. However, 3 of them are DNFs. So I'll talk about the DNFs first. First is The Fraud by Zadie Smith. So this is a book that I was reading for my work book club, and I did read over half the book before DNFing. And the reason I DNF was really just because I didn't know what was going on. I feel like this is probably a really good book, and I could sort of recognise that, but it was just out of my grasp. I was just too confused, and the further into the book I got, I was just like, I couldn't even tell you what was happening. So this is historical fiction. I mean, I couldn't tell you much more than literally what's on the blurb. There is a sort of a central mystery, which is this man who, I think he was like shipwrecked and then reappears years later, but looks completely different. Like, he's meant to speak French, but somehow he's forgotten to speak French. And there's a trial around whether or not he really is who he claims to be. And then there's another character called, I think her name's Eliza, and she sort of goes to live with her cousin who's a writer, and she is an interesting character in terms of sort of the relationship she has. She's older, she's I think in her 70s, and so we have all these different strands of the story, which in themselves are all kind of interesting, but I just got lost, and I think it jumped around in time a bit, but that wasn't overtly clear to me, because in one chapter a character would die and then the next chapter they'd be alive again. So I was like, oh, so we've gone back, or did I just imagine that? I don't know. I've never made it to the end of a Zadie Smith. I have DNF'd on Beauty as well. So perhaps she's not an author for me. The next DNF was actually a buddy read. So I was reading this with Melinda from A Web of Stories. This is Between Summer's Longing and Winter's End by Lief G W Person. This is translated from Swedish by someone called Paul Norland. So this is a book that I think I received in my book subscription box a little while ago. Been on my shelves for a while. It's really, really long, and this is apparently an award-winning Swedish classic. It's sort of, following a police force. I think there's like politics, espionage, sort of quite gritty. So I read about 50 pages and then I messaged Melinda and said, I'm finding this quite offensive and quite misogynistic. And so the thing is, sometimes obviously characters in books will be horrible and have misogynistic views or whatever it might be, and that's that character. But it just felt like it was pervading through the whole of what I was reading, to the point that I wasn't enjoying it. I had no desire to carry on. So Melinda said, yeah, I'm sort of feeling the same. So we did DNF it. We are going to be buddy reading another book instead shortly, which I'm sure you'll probably see me talk about in the next clip. Hopefully that will go much better. And the next DNF was The Long Forgotten by David Whitehouse. This is a book that's been on my shelves for some time. It came into my life randomly, and I read probably maybe half of this book before DNFing it. It looks at an interesting premise, and it's about what if your memories are not your memories? What if you have somehow, for some reason, memories of somebody else? And so I think books about memory are really interesting. I think it's one of the reasons I really like Ishiguro's writing, because his books are pretty much always about memory. And this sort of could have been a good book, but for me, it felt not terribly well executed. It just didn't quite hang together cohesively. There were a few different sort of strands to the story, and it just didn't quite work for me. So those are the DNFs so far. I mean, there's probably going to be more by the end of this video, let's be honest. But I've already read 7 more books. I have been off work recently with a bad back, and we've had no TV or internet, hence I've pretty much been getting through a book a day. So, The Long Shadow by Celia Fremlin. This is a crime mystery novel, first published, I think, was it like in the 70s? Let's see, 75, recently republished by Faber. I read Uncle Paul by this author a couple of months ago and really, really enjoyed it. And this one, again, I really, really enjoyed. This is set in the run-up to Christmas and over Christmas. And we follow a woman who is widowed, who gets a phone call one day from a stranger who says, basically, I know you killed your husband and I can prove it. She doesn't know who this person is, she doesn't know what they're talking about. So we have a family gathering and strange things are happening. So I think, like, I don't know, in her deceased husband's office, like, books are out that he would have been reading and things are moving around in a mysterious way. So there's all, like, a lot of suspicion on various characters. But I very much enjoyed it. I really like Celia Fremlin's writing, actually, and I think they are going to be republishing more of her books because I think she's very, very good. Then I picked up a short story collection just because I wanted something quick and easy to read, and this is Sleep No More by P.D. James. This is a set of 6 murderous tales. Very enjoyable. I feel like I may have read some of these before, maybe in other collections or anthologies. But yeah, entertaining, all featuring a murder. Nothing sort of remarkable, but, you know, a decent read. Next is Necessary People by Anna Pitoniak. Another book that's been on my shelves for some time. I don't even know where I heard about this, why I picked it up. This is a Book of the Month edition from, like, May 2019. So I don't know how it's ended up over here, because that's a US and Canada thing, I think. Anyway, Necessary People was quite an enjoyable sort of thriller following 2 friends, Stella and Violet. And Stella is sort of quite privileged. She doesn't really have to work for anything. She's very popular, and Violet is sort of the opposite. They are close friends or frenemies. So it's set around the like broadcasting industry, following sort of rivalries between the 2 of them. There is some darker aspects to the story as we go on. It was entertaining and enjoyable. Next, we're going for some classic crime now. This is Through a Glass Darkly by Helen McCloy. So this is a crime novel which was first published, when was it first published? In 1949. So this is set in a girls' school. And a mystery that surrounds one of the teachers. So right at the start of the book, this teacher is dismissed from the school, and isn't really given a proper explanation for her dismissal. And what we find out really early on in the book, so it's not really a spoiler, is that mysterious things have been happening. So people have been seeing this teacher in various circumstances where she couldn't possibly have been because someone else has just seen her somewhere else. And so it's all very mysterious. It is a bit sort of like spooky. Is it something supernatural going on? Is it some sort of trick? I like this because it has elements of sort of an impossible mystery, like how could these things have happened? Lots of sort of suspicious characters at the school. I do like a school setting as well. So this is a good sort of classic mystery that I would recommend. And then sticking with classic crime fiction, I read The Man Who Could Not Shudder by John Dickson Carr. This was first published in 1940. So John Dickson Carr is one of my favourite Golden Age writers, and he's the master of the locked room mystery or the impossible puzzle. And this one was very, very enjoyable. I really, really like this one. This was excellent. And again, it had quite a spooky feel, which I didn't know going into it. It was just sort of coincidence. So it centres around this house which is said to be haunted, which this man has recently purchased, and there are all these sort of legends and tales about different things that have happened there in the past in this house. And so he decides to host a haunted house party, invites a number of guests to stay with him in the house. And wouldn't you know it, someone dies. Who would have thought it? So the sort of central mystery here and the impossibility is around the fact that there is a witness who sees there are a number of guns displayed on the wall in this room, and one of the guns appears to lift itself off the wall and shoot a man by itself, as if by magic. So the puzzle is, of course, how did this happen? How was the person shot? And who did it? Dr. Gideon Fell makes an appearance in this one, who is one of the characters who appears in a lot of John Dickson Carr books. And he's sort of the Poirot character, if you like, who solves the mystery. I thought this was excellent. There was sort of various twists and turns along the way. Lots of people had secrets. It was a closed circle of suspects, which I always like. And just thoroughly entertaining. I really, really enjoyed this. This is probably one of my favourite John Dickson Carr books that I have read so far. Next up, some non-fiction, unusually for me. And this is Ace by Angela Chen. So this is What Asexuality Reveals About Desire, Society and the Meaning of Sex. This was excellent. I thought this was really informative and really engaging. So as the title suggests, it is about asexuality, and it explains sort of what that means. It talks about what it means to be aromantic. It talks about the sort of spectrum of different identities that can come under ace identities. It talks about, what's the phrase? I think it's compulsory sexuality, and sort of how it's assumed that there is a certain norm around sexuality, which really is a social construct, and you know how sometimes asexuality can be seen to be sort of lacking something, but actually, you know, it's much deeper than that. It talks about the difference between sex drive and sexual attraction. It talks about sort of romance and friendship. It talks about queer platonic relationships. I thought this was really, really great. It interweaves stories of different people, different you know, people the author's spoken to and so on, and also interweaves the author's own experience as well. I thought this was a really, really great non-fiction, one of the best non-fictions I've read this year, and I would highly recommend. And then the book that I just finished last night is a book that I have actually DNF'd in the past. I think I only read about 20 pages of it a few years ago and just didn't get into it. But it's My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. This, of course, is a very popular book. It was shortlisted for the Women's Prize a few years ago, and I think it was on the Booker nominations as well. It's set in Lagos in Nigeria, and we follow two sisters. The book opens when one of the sisters calls the other and says, "I've killed him," and so the other sister, what are their names? Corradi and Ayula. Ayula's the one who is the serial killer, and Corradi has to help Ayula dispose of the body, and then it transpires early on in the novel that this is actually the third time she's done this. She's killed a boyfriend, and Corradi feels this sort of responsibility towards her sister to help her, I guess, and we see the sort of the distress that causes for her. It is, I guess, sort of darkly funny in parts. I mean, I possibly didn't find it as funny as it's marketed as, if you see what I mean. But I thought it was a great story. So the crux of the story is Corradi works in a hospital, and she has a bit of a crush on one of her colleagues, who's a doctor who works there, but then Iola sort of has her eye on him as well, and obviously Corradi's worried that if Iola starts to date him, it could be dangerous for him. I really enjoyed this. I don't really know why I DNF'd it before, because I thought it was very, very good. Very enjoyable. And the amount of times I've looked at this cover, but I only just realised, not far from finishing the book, that in the glasses of this character on the cover, in the glasses there's a reflection of a hand holding a knife, which I can't believe I've never noticed before. Before I tell you about the books I've been reading over the last week or so, I wanted to update you on something tangentially book related. last weekend I went to see The Mousetrap, the play by Agatha Christie. It was the 70th anniversary tour, and it was great. I have read the play before a long time ago, so I did know who done it, but I still thoroughly enjoyed it, and there was parts of the play which I had forgotten about and that were surprises to me. And it was kind of quite funny as well, which I wasn't expecting. I don't know if the comedy has been sort of subsequently put into it, whether that existed in the original play or not. But yeah, it was excellent. The first book I want to talk about is a book that I should have talked about in the first clip, but I forgot that I had read it because I have lost my copy, and it's very annoying to me because I feel like it must be in this room. I only read this book a couple of weeks ago. Don't know where it's gone. Anyway, it was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. So this was a reread for me, and I read it for the first time about 3 years ago and absolutely loved it. And again, thoroughly enjoyed rereading it. I think Frankenstein, I can say, is my favourite classic novel. I'm not going to tell you about the plot of Frankenstein. I'm sure you're aware of what Frankenstein is about. I will say that if you're not a big classics reader like me, I do think Frankenstein is a good one to pick up because it's pretty short. I think it's very accessible, and there's a lot of plot. Stuff happens in that book. My favourite thing about Frankenstein is the narrative layers to the story. So the book starts off with this man writing to his, I think it's his sister, and he's been on some sort of like long sea voyage. So it's this letter to his sister that he's writing, and within that letter he recounts how he has encountered Victor Frankenstein on his travels. And then we get a section of the book again within the letter, which is where Victor Frankenstein is recounting to the main narrator, whose name I can't remember, what's happened with him, the creature he's created, etc. And then within that, there is a couple of chapters in the middle of the book where it's the creature talking to Victor Frankenstein. And I just really, really like sort of the different layers of the story as it gets told to us. I just love everything about that book. I think it's brilliant. Then I picked up The Night House by Jo Nesbo. This is translated from Norwegian by Neil Smith. So this is fairly recently published, and it's sort of in the style of a classic horror novel. As you can see from the cover, which I really like, with this sort of like spooky house and a telephone with blood dripping from it. So this is about Richard, who's about 14 years old, and one day he is hanging out with one of his friends from school, and I can't even remember what they're doing. For some reason the friend is making a telephone call, and his friend gets sucked into the telephone, very gorily described. This happens within the first sort of few pages. So then Richard obviously goes and tells, his family and like the police what's happened. And no one believes him, obviously, because how could his friend possibly have been eaten by a telephone? That's ridiculous. And so he's, trying to convince them that it did really happen, that he saw this happen. And then another one of his friends, another one of his classmates goes missing, and he is again under suspicion. I liked the way that this story went to a certain extent, and then I kind of wasn't too sure about it. But overall, I did enjoy it. I think if you like a book with some twists and turns that goes maybe somewhat unexpected places, you might like this. I was kind of intrigued by what I'd heard about it, which is why I wanted to pick it up, and I'm glad I did pick it up. There's certain aspects of it that I'm not too sure about, but I did overall quite like it, and it was quite for the most part, quite sort of a fun, sort of quite gory horror story. And then I think I've got a DNF. The bookmark is still in it, but I think it's going to have to come out. I've read just under half of this, and it's Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. So this obviously is a very popular fantasy book. It's a cosy fantasy book. I don't read fantasy at all, really. I I picked this one up because I saw my library had recently acquired a copy, and obviously I've heard so many great things about it, and I thought I'd give it a go. And it's fine, so I'm about halfway through. It's about a character called Viv, who is an orc barbarian. I mean, I don't know what that means. I suppose it doesn't help that there's a lot of lingo in here and sort of different like races of people that it doesn't mean anything to me, so that possibly doesn't help. Anyway, this Viv opens a coffee shop in this place, and where no one has ever heard of coffee before. So it's sort of, it has cosy vibes. There is some backstory. It's not like, I don't think it's super cozy because there is like mild threat, I would say. But I'm not sure that I am interested enough to keep reading. I might just sort of like read the last chapter and class that as a DNF. I think the bookmark is going to come out. We're now another week into November and I've read 2 more books. No DNFs this week, how unusual. The first book I read was Haven by Emma Donoghue, which was a buddy read with Melinda from A Web of Stories. So you'll have seen earlier on in the month that Melinda and I tried to buddy read that Swedish crime novel, which neither of us liked. So we chose Haven instead by Emma Donoghue. So we've each read, I think, 2 Emma Donoghues previously, but we've each read different Emma Donoghues. So I've read The Wonder and Room, both of which I really enjoyed. Haven is very different again. I think all 3 of the Emma Donoghues I've read have all felt very different to each other, but I have enjoyed all of them. So Haven is, we follow 3 priests who, it's set in, is it 17th century Ireland. Well, 1 priest and 2 monks. And this priest called Art decides he sort of has a calling from God to go and set up a monastery on this sort of deserted island. So he enlists the help of these 2 monks. One's an older man called Cormac and one's a younger man called Trian, and the 3 of them set sail to find the place where they're going to sort of found this monastery and live this life. It's quite a sparse book in some ways and sort of quite bleak in terms of, I guess, its setting. It's very well written and there is a great sense of place. And so when the 3 of them arrive on this island, they have to obviously try to survive. The island hasn't been inhabited before. There are lots of birds. I think there's lots of puffins on the island. And Art has this feeling that God will provide and, it'll all be fine. Whereas the other 2 are a bit more realistic, I guess. And trying to do things, suggesting things that would help them to survive. The relationships between the 3 characters I thought were really, really interesting. I thought the 3 characters themselves were very, very interesting. I do like a book that has not too many characters, so we can really sort of focus on those 3. I enjoyed it. I liked the direction that it took. There were some surprises along the way. But it's not like a super plot heavy book, but it's good and it was a good buddy read because there's some stuff to get into. So I really enjoyed that. And then I picked up Rouge by Mona Awad. So this is Mona Awad's latest novel to be published. I have read Bunny before, which I did enjoy, but I also don't know what I thought of Bunny. I think Rouge is not quite as weird as Bunny, but I have seen reviews online of people who say that Rouge is weirder than Bunny. I guess it probably depends what you define as weird. I really like this cover, which has a rose on it, but also it's a jellyfish. So Rouge is kind of a bit of an exploration of beauty and the beauty industry. The main character is called Belle and she is obsessed with skincare. She there's a lot of sort of different products that she uses and that are described, and she talks about all her routine, and she has very, very strict rules about what she uses. And I found that quite amusing because I quite like skincare, I'm not going to lie. Possibly not to the extent that Belle does, but I do like my skincare. And so when she was talking about like the different products and the sort of like, so they're written as if like to sound vaguely ridiculous. So they have, so some of the names are things like Orpheus Flower Peptide Complex and Dewy Bioradiant Snow Mushroom Mist and things like that. Diamond Infused Revitalising Eye Formula. So yeah, sort of thing. The names of them do make me laugh, but I do like my skincare products. But anyway, so she's really, really into skincare, and her mother has died in sort of slightly mysterious circumstances. So she ends up going to visiting the spa, which is where her mother used to go to try and find stuff out about her mother. And this spa is quite unusual. And the book gets increasingly strange and sort of dreamlike, and you don't quite know what's real and what's not and what's going on, and so it becomes sort of increasingly weird. There is a description in here where she goes to get a treatment, a facial in the spa, and I get facials quite regularly, and it just made me laugh because it was very bizarre. What I liked about the book is that Mona Awad doesn't serve all the answers up to you on a plate. So to a certain extent, it's for the reader to determine what they think has happened in the book, or how they interpret what has happened in the book. It's not like totally vague or anything, but there is stuff that's left to interpretation, I think, similar to in Bunny. I have my thoughts about what I think was going on. I thought it was really, really effective, and it looks at some sort of dark issues, and I just thought it was a really great representation of some difficult things. It's described as looking at the dark side of beauty, envy, grief, and the complicated love between mothers and daughters. And it was very sort of visceral as well. The descriptions of the horror-ish, weird stuff that was going on was very vivid. I thought this was great. I think this is a book that will probably stay with me, that I'll probably keep thinking about. So do let me know if you've read this, and if you've got any thoughts. So it's now the end of November, and I just have one final book to talk about. This book was a massive disappointment, and it's such a shame because I was highly anticipating this book. I made sure I was high up in the queue at the library, but I really, really didn't like it. And it's the new Poirot by Sophie Hannah. So this is Hercule Poirot's Silent Night. This is the 5th book in Sophie Hannah's Poirot series. I have enjoyed the previous 4 books in the series, and Sophie Hannah is one of my favourite contemporary crime writers. I was a big fan of her work even before she started writing the Poirot continuation novels. So what's this book about? The setup is, it's set in the run-up to Christmas, and Poirot and Catchpool, is he Inspector Catchpool? Inspector Catchpool, the books are all, in this series, are all told from Catchpool's perspective. He's a bit like the Hastings sidekick. So Poirot and Catchpool are invited to spend Christmas and the run-up to Christmas with this family. The father of this family is very unwell. He doesn't have long left to live, and after Christmas he will be moving to a nursing home. When the family were visiting the nursing home to see the room where he would be going to live in, while they were there, the patient in the room next door was murdered. So the the mother of the family, this guy's wife, believes that if he moves into this nursing home, he'll be the next to be murdered. But he is adamant that he wants to move into this nursing home and he wants to try and solve the crime himself. So anyway, the family call upon Poirot to solve the crime. My first issue with the book is it was kind of boring. I probably would have DNF'd at about the halfway mark if it wasn't for the fact that this is a Poirot novel, and how can I possibly DNF a Poirot novel? My dad did DNF this book. He told me that he DNF'd it, this is before I picked it up, and I was slightly outraged that he had DNF Poirot, but now I think that was the right decision. I guessed whodunit pretty early on, and my opinion on that, my sort of prediction on that didn't really change throughout the novel, and I was right. Now, whilst when that happens you feel a little bit smug, I don't like guessing whodunit, and I really don't expect to guess whodunit when I read a Sophie Hannah novel, whether that's Poirot or whether that's one of her own sort of series of crime novels. Because Sophie Hannah is well known as sort of coming up with these really wild sort of setups that you think, how would anyone ever even like think of that? So to read a book that she has written and guess who done it, to me is a big disappointment. I want the reveal to be a surprise, but I want it to make sense. Like, I want to be like, okay, I can see that the clues were there, but I really didn't get where it was going. That's what I want. I think that the reveal, and I'm not going to give any spoilers, but the reveal for me relied on quite an old-fashioned trope, a trope that I personally don't really like in crime fiction. And it felt quite lazy as well on the part of the writer. I'm just really, really surprised at this book because I just don't think it's a very good book. If you are interested in trying this series out, I would recommend the earlier books. Don't start with this one. I mean, it does have good, reviews online, but for me, it was a real letdown, and that was a real shame. So that's everything I read in November. I'm looking forward to December's reading. If you've seen my end of the year tag video, you'll have heard about some of my reading plans for the end of the year, which I'm very excited for. And I also get to start opening my book advent calendar today, which I will film as we go throughout the month of December. And that unboxing video will go up between Christmas and New Year. So thanks for watching. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, or let me know what you've been reading. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Bye.